The first time I saw him, I almost dropped my coffee. Not because he was particularly handsome, though God he was, but because I had already written him. His smirk, the arrogant tilt of his chin, even the way he loosened his tie as though the world should bend at his comfort. All of it was ink and paper before it ever breathed in front of me. He was my villain, and now he was standing in the doorway of my office, introducing himself as my new colleague. "Ethan Carter," he said, offering his hand like he wasn't about to dismantle my sanity. I stared at him, my heart crawling up into my throat. "You've got to be kidding me." Of course, he wasn't. The universe has a sense of humor so cruel it borders on sadistic. I had spent months pouring every ounce of my frustration, my self-doubt, and maybe even the parts of myself I hated most into the antagonist of my play. This wasn't just any character. This was the man who broke hearts for fun, who manipulated people like they were marionettes, who thrived on control. And now here he was, in a tailored suit that fit like sin, walking into my life not as fiction but as flesh. And worse, he knew. Not right away. At first, he played the role of charming stranger with unnerving ease. But then came the comments, casual, offhand remarks that echoed lines I had written. Lines no one but me should know. It was as though he'd reached into my notebook and pulled out the worst pieces of my imagination, wearing them like a second skin. "You wrote me cruel," he murmured once, leaning too close during a late-night work session. "But you forgot to write me lonely." I had laughed, sharp and defensive. "You're insane." But inside, a dangerous thought flickered. What if he wasn't? The play itself was supposed to be my redemption. A story of love, betrayal, and resilience, performed on the small stage of a downtown New York theater, written in cramped apartments with too much coffee and too little sunlight. It was raw and messy just like me. And now Ethan, real Ethan, was unraveling it, twisting it, insisting that he wasn't just some character on the page. He wanted to live it. The first act of my life had always been survival. Growing up in a small town where boys like me were supposed to keep their heads down, where love was something whispered behind closed doors. Writing was my escape, my rebellion, my way of saying, "You can't silence me forever." But now, with Ethan in the picture, survival suddenly seemed less important than temptation. Because as much as I hated to admit it, I was drawn to him. Every fight, every mocking grin, every stolen glance when he thought I wasn't looking, it pulled at me. He was dangerous in ways I couldn't name, but he was also magnetic. It was like standing on the edge of a rooftop, the city sprawling beneath you, knowing one wrong step could kill you but leaning forward anyway because the wind feels too damn good. And then there were the moments he let the mask slip. The nights when exhaustion softened his edges, when his laughter wasn't calculated but real, when he looked at me like he wasn't the villain, and maybe I wasn't the hero, and maybe we were just two men who didn't know how to stop hurting. But reality doesn't bend easily. The office whispered. Colleagues raised eyebrows at the way we clashed, at the sparks that flew in conference rooms and lingered too long after meetings. And outside, society had its expectations, its unspoken rules about who we could love and how loudly we could love them. Falling for Ethan wasn't just complicated, it was dangerous. And yet, as he stood in front of me one rainy night, drenched and unguarded, I realized something terrifying. I didn't care. That's when he said it. "You gave me this role," Ethan whispered, rain dripping from his hair, his voice breaking like it had never broken before. "Now let me play it. Let me prove that I can be more than the villain in your story." And for the first time in my life, I had no words. I didn't sleep that night. His words stuck to my skin like rain-soaked clothes, impossible to peel off. "You gave me this role. Now let me play it." Who even says something like that? Who looks at another human being and claims their life as though it were a stage? But Ethan wasn't like anyone else I had ever met, and maybe that was the problem. The next morning, the office buzzed with the usual chaos. Phones ringing, printers whining, interns rushing past with coffee orders that would probably be wrong anyway. I told myself I'd bury it. Pretend last night hadn't happened. Pretend he wasn't standing a few feet away. His sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened, as if the world bent toward him just to make him comfortable. He caught me staring. Of course he did. "You look terrible," he said smoothly, not even glancing up from the file in his hand. "And you look smug," I shot back. His smirk widened. "So nothing new then?" God, I hated him. I hated how quickly he could disarm me, how easily he could shift the balance of the room. Everyone else seemed charmed, laughing at his jokes, leaning into his charisma like moths to a flame. They didn't know the darkness he carried, the way he could strip me bare with just a few words. They didn't know I had already written him into existence. That evening, I sat at my apartment desk, the cheap wood worn down from years of scribbling drafts. My play sat open in front of me, The Villain of Verona, my so-called masterpiece. In the story, the villain wasn't just cruel for cruelty's sake. He was broken, hiding pain under layers of manipulation and control. He destroyed others because he couldn't save himself. And now Ethan wanted to live it. I traced the lines I had written months ago. The villain only knows how to burn bridges because no one ever taught him how to build them. It was fiction then. But when I pictured Ethan's tired eyes from last night, the line felt like prophecy. The following week blurred into a rhythm I couldn't escape. Meetings, deadlines, endless hours in the same room as him. The tension between us thickened, sharp enough to cut. Sometimes it felt like war, other times like gravity. One night, I stayed late to finish edits. The office was quiet, humming only with the low buzz of fluorescent lights. I thought I was alone until I heard the click of footsteps behind me. "Still here." Ethan's voice, low and tired, floated across the room. "Some of us actually work," I muttered, not looking up. He laughed softly, but it wasn't mocking this time. It was human. "Touché." Silence stretched, heavy but not unbearable. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Why did you write him that way?" My pen froze. "What?" "The villain," he clarified, stepping closer. His shadow spilled across my desk. "You made him cruel, yes, manipulative, but you also made him desperate, like he was screaming for something no one would give him." "Why?" I swallowed hard. "Because that's how people are. They're never just one thing." "And which part of him is you?" His question landed like a punch. I looked up, meeting his eyes. They weren't mocking, not tonight. They were searching. Raw. "None," I said too quickly. "Bullshit." The word lingered in the air between us, and for the first time I didn't have a defense. That night, we ended up in the break room, two tired men nursing cheap coffee under the hum of vending machines. He told me he grew up in Chicago, that his father had been a man who loved power more than people. He spoke like he hadn't told anyone in years, like the words were rusty from disuse. And maybe because I was stupid, or maybe because I was lonely, I told him about my small hometown. About the church pews where I sat pretending to be someone I wasn't. About the boy I once kissed behind the bleachers and the bruise I carried for weeks after when someone found out. For a while, we weren't writer and villain. We weren't enemies. We were just two men who had learned too young what it meant to be broken. But the thing about fragile moments is that they never last. The next day, he was back to smirks and jabs, and I was back to pretending he didn't get under my skin. But now I knew the truth. Beneath his perfect suit, Ethan Carter wasn't made of steel. He was made of scars. And God help me, I wanted to touch every one of them. The real breaking point came on a Friday night. The company hosted a small gathering downtown. A bar, too much alcohol, colleagues loosening their ties and laughing too loudly. I had planned to slip out early, but Ethan cornered me before I could escape. "You're avoiding me," he said, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "Maybe I just don't like you," I snapped. "Liar." I glared at him, but his eyes burned with something I didn't recognize, something terrifying in its honesty. And then, before I could stop him, he leaned in. Not enough to kiss, just enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "You're terrified of how much you want this. And the worst part? He was right." I left the bar without a word, my chest tight, my head a storm. I walked the streets of New York until the city blurred into neon streaks, until the ache inside me threatened to split me open. I told myself he was the villain. I told myself I couldn't afford to fall. But when I got home, the first thing I did was open my play again. And I rewrote the ending. The new version wasn't about a hero defeating a villain. It was about two broken men learning how to stop destroying each other. It was about forgiveness, about love that was messy and hard but real. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I realized something terrifyingly simple. I wasn't just writing him anymore. I was writing us. The first rehearsal of The Villain of Verona was supposed to be a triumph. My words, my story, living and breathing on stage at last. Instead, it felt like I was drowning. Because he was there. Ethan leaned casually in the back row of the small black box theater, arms folded, eyes locked on me as though every line spoken on stage belonged to him. He didn't need to say a word. His presence alone was enough to set fire to my nerves. When rehearsal ended, the actors filtered out in a wave of chatter and laughter. I stayed behind, gathering my notes, praying he would just leave. But of course he didn't. "You changed the ending," he said simply. I froze. "You read it." He tilted his head, smirk tugging at his mouth. "You left a copy on your desk. Temptation's a bitch." My pulse spiked. "You had no right." "You rewrote him," Ethan interrupted, stepping closer. "You gave him a chance to be redeemed." His voice dropped, softer now. "You gave him a chance to be loved." I swallowed hard. "So what?" His eyes searched mine, unguarded in a way that scared me more than his smirk ever could. "So why can't you give me the same chance?" The question shattered something inside me. I didn't answer him. Instead, I ran. Out of the theater, into the wet Manhattan streets, my sneakers slapping against pavement slick with rain. I told myself I was being smart, that I was protecting myself. But the truth was simpler. I was terrified. Because he wasn't wrong. Every time I told myself he was the villain, he showed me a glimpse of someone else. A man who carried pain like an extra layer of skin, who laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, who stared at me like I was the only thing holding him together. And the worst part? I wanted to hold him. The following week was hell. I avoided him at work, buried myself in scripts and deadlines, forced laughter with colleagues to disguise the storm raging inside me. But Ethan wasn't letting go. He left notes on my desk, quotes from my play, underlined with infuriating precision. He lingered in doorways, always watching, always waiting. And one night, when I stayed late to rewrite a scene, he cornered me again. "You can't keep running," he said quietly, blocking the doorway. "I can try." I shot back, though my voice wavered. His jaw tightened. For the first time, there was no smirk, no arrogance. Just raw frustration. "Do you know what it's like to read yourself on a page? To see every ugly part of who you are exposed for the world, and to know someone saw it before you did?" I faltered. "Ethan, you think you hate me," he continued, voice rough now. "But maybe you just hate that you understand me." The words hit like lightning. And before I could think, before I could stop myself, I stepped forward. Just one step, close enough that his breath brushed my skin. It would have been so easy. Just lean in. Just let go. But I didn't. I turned away, heart hammering like a war drum. Good night, Ethan. I left him standing there, shoulders tense, eyes burning into my back. 2 days later, everything cracked. It happened at the company's quarterly showcase, an event where executives, investors, and critics packed into a polished hall to watch upcoming projects. My play was on the docket for a reading, my chance to prove myself. The performance began smoothly. The actors read their lines with passion, the audience leaning in. But then, midway through, one of the actors froze. He stumbled over his lines, glancing nervously toward the back of the room. I followed his gaze. Ethan was there, not in the shadows this time, but in full view, eyes locked on the stage like he owned it. And then, God help me, he spoke. I can do it better. The room fell silent. Heads swiveled toward him, whispers rippling. My chest seized. Ethan, sit down. I hissed, my voice drowned by the microphone feedback. But he didn't. He walked forward, unbothered by the stares, and took the script straight from the actor's trembling hands. And then he read. Not lines, not words on a page. He breathed life into them, raw and desperate and magnetic. Every syllable was fire, every pause a knife. The villain I had written was standing there in flesh and blood, terrifying and beautiful all at once. The audience was spellbound, and me, I was falling. When he finished, silence lingered like a held breath before applause erupted, thunderous and unstoppable. People rose to their feet. Investors nodded, impressed. Colleagues clapped me on the back, congratulating me. But all I could see was him, standing in the center of the stage, looking at me like he had just stolen not only my script but my soul. That night we argued. Of course we did. You humiliated me, I snapped, slamming my apartment door shut behind us. I saved you, Ethan shot back, unflinching. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to. His voice cracked, anger bleeding into something else. I know what this story means to you. I know because it means something to me too. I stopped cold. Why? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time there was no villain, no arrogance, no mask. Just a man broken and bare. Because for once in my life, I saw myself not as the monster, but as someone who could be loved anyway. The silence that followed was suffocating. And then, before I could speak, before I could think, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't planned. It was fire and desperation, the collision of two storms that had been building for too long. I should have pulled away. I should have ended it. But I didn't. Kissed him back. The world didn't stop for us. Outside, cars honked, people laughed, life went on. But in that moment, nothing existed except his hands gripping my shoulders, my fingers tangling in his hair, the taste of rain and regret on our lips. When we finally broke apart, gasping, neither of us spoke. Words felt too small for what had just happened. But in his eyes, I saw it. The truth I had been running from all along. This wasn't just a story anymore. This was real. That night changed everything. At work, we tried to pretend nothing had happened. But every glance lingered too long. Every brush of fingers burned like fire. At rehearsals, actors stumbled over lines because they could feel it too. The pull between us, thick as smoke. And yet, outside those stolen moments, reality crept in. Society didn't bend easily. Whispers spread. Colleagues speculated. One afternoon, I overheard someone sneer. Figures Carter would sink his claws into him. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance. The words cut deep, not just because they were cruel, but because part of me feared they were true. Was I just another script for him to perform? Another stage for him to conquer? Or was I something more? The question haunted me. And one night, as I sat across from him in my apartment, scripts scattered and coffee gone cold, I finally asked, "Am I just your role, Ethan? Another performance?" He froze. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer, but then he leaned forward, his voice low, trembling. "No," he whispered. "You're the first thing that's ever felt real." And for the first time I believed him. That was when the story stopped being mine alone. It became ours. The morning after our kiss, the world looked the same, but nothing felt the same. New York still roared outside my window. Horns, sirens, the relentless hum of a city that never sleeps. My alarm still screamed at 7. My coffee still tasted bitter. My tie still choked me the same way it always did. And yet everything was different. Because Ethan Carter had kissed me. Because I had kissed him back. Because now there was no way to pretend anymore. At the office, we didn't speak about it. Not directly, but the silence was loud, deafening. Every meeting was a battlefield of stolen glances and unspoken words. Every hallway was a tightrope, every brush of his sleeve against mine a spark that set my nerves on fire. It might have stayed that way, quiet, secret, dangerous, if not for the whispers. They started small. A smirk here, a raised eyebrow there. My colleagues weren't stupid. They saw the way we looked at each other, the way tension coiled around us like smoke. And in an office where gossip spread faster than wildfire, it was only a matter of time before speculation turned to accusation. "Carter's got him under his thumb," someone muttered near the break room. "He's just using the kid to push his way up. Pathetic. Doesn't even see he's being played." I told myself not to care. I told myself their voices didn't matter. But each word lodged like glass in my chest. Because deep down I wasn't sure they were wrong. The real blow came during a board meeting. We were presenting progress on the play's adaptation, Ethan and I, side by side in front of a panel of executives. My heart pounded as I explained character arcs, thematic choices, why the story mattered. And just as I began to relax, just as I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd pull this off, one of the executives leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Interesting work," he said smoothly, "but I can't help noticing a certain influence in the revisions. Ethan, you seem awfully invested in this story. More than usual." I froze. The room buzzed with unspoken meaning. Influence. Invested. Everyone heard what he really meant. Ethan's jaw clenched. "I believe in the project," he said evenly. The executive's smirk widened. "Or perhaps you believe in the playwright?" Laughter rippled around the table. Sharp, cruel. I felt my face burn. My notebook shook in my hands. "Enough?" Ethan snapped, his voice slicing through the room like a blade. His eyes blazed as he glared at the executive. "Mock me all you want, but don't you dare diminish his work. He's more talented than half the people you put on stage. And I'll fight anyone who says otherwise." The room fell silent. Deadly, suffocating silence. And in that silence, something shifted. Ethan wasn't just defending me. He was claiming me, publicly, recklessly. My chest ached with something dangerously close to pride and fear. Afterward, I cornered him in the stairwell, away from prying eyes. "Are you insane?" I hissed. "Do you know what that looked like?" "Yes," he shot back. "It looked like the truth. The truth will get us both destroyed," I snapped. His eyes softened then, losing their fire. "Or it'll set us free." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I had lived too long in the shadow of other people's expectations, too long hiding pieces of myself because the world wasn't ready to see them. Freedom isn't that easy, I whispered. No, he admitted, stepping closer. But neither is love. And then he touched my hand, just briefly, just enough to remind me of the night we had burned. And I knew I was already too far gone. The days that followed were a blur of tension and defiance. Rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers turned into stares, stares into snide remarks. Some colleagues avoided me altogether, their silence louder than their judgment. Others weren't so subtle. One evening, as I packed up my things, I overheard two coworkers laughing in the hallway. "Carter and his pet playwright," one sneered. "Bet he won't last long. Once Carter gets bored, he'll drop him like nothing." My chest tightened, shame and rage battling inside me. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to defend Ethan. But I didn't. I just shoved my notebook into my bag and walked out, my throat burning. When I reached the street, Ethan was waiting. He must have seen my face because his smile faded instantly. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing," I muttered. He caught my arm, pulling me to face him. His eyes searched mine, fierce and unrelenting. "Don't shut me out. Tell me. The dam broke. They think I'm just your toy," I burst out, voice cracking. "They think you're using me, that none of this is real, and maybe they're right." The words echoed, ugly and raw. Ethan flinched as if I'd struck him. "Is that what you think?" he asked quietly. I couldn't answer. My silence was louder than any words. For a moment, he just stared at me, pain flickering across his face. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. And I let him. That night I couldn't write, couldn't sleep, could barely breathe. His absence was everywhere. In the empty space beside me, in the silence that filled my apartment, in the echo of his last question. "Is that what you think?" I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to run after him, to pull him back, to say the thing I had been too afraid to admit. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know anymore. I didn't know where the story ended and reality began. Didn't know if he loved me, or if he just loved the idea of being redeemed. All I knew was that I was falling, and I didn't know if he'd catch me. The storm broke a week later. I was called into HR. The words were polite, professional, rehearsed, but the message was clear. The rumors had reached higher ears. Questions were being asked. Allegations of favoritism. Concerns about ethics. My chest went numb. My career, my play, everything I had worked for, it was slipping through my fingers. When I walked out of that meeting, Ethan was waiting in the hallway, his face tense. One look at me and he knew. "They're coming for us," I said flatly. He didn't hesitate. He took my hand, right there in the middle of the office, in full view of anyone who cared to look. His grip was firm, unshakable. "Then let them," he said. And for the first time, I believed we might survive this. That night, I sat at my desk, pen in hand, and wrote the hardest scene of my life. Not for the play, for us. It wasn't a scene of villains or heroes. It wasn't about redemption or destruction. It was about two men, standing together against the world, terrified but unbroken. Because maybe love wasn't about being safe. Maybe it was about being brave. And for him, for us, I was ready to be brave. He laughed in disbelief, the kind of laugh that cracked at the edges because it carried too much fear inside it. "You're insane, Nathan. This isn't real. It was never supposed to be." But Nathan's eyes, piercing in the pale glow of the rooftop lights, didn't waver. It was always real, Alex. You just didn't want to admit it. For a moment, the city seemed to hold its breath. Down below, traffic rushed like blood through arteries. But up here, the world was suspended in silence. Alex's heart slammed painfully against his ribs as he realized there was no script anymore. No safety net of fiction. Only them, and the truth clawing its way to the surface. He thought of every warning sign, every late-night whisper of self-doubt, every reminder that this story, two men caught between love and destruction, was doomed to collapse under the weight of reality. But then Nathan stepped closer, and Alex felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. Nathan's voice softened, no longer a villain's monologue but a plea. I don't care how the world sees me. I don't care what they call me. The only thing that scares me is losing you. The confession cracked something open in Alex. All the anger, all the fear, all the careful walls he had built around his heart dissolved in an instant. He wanted to scream at Nathan for making him feel this way. He wanted to run, but he also wanted desperately to stay. Do you have any idea what it means? Alex whispered, his voice trembling. To walk into fire with you? To let myself love you, knowing what it could cost me. Nathan closed the final inch between them, his breath brushing against Alex's lips. Then burn with me, because I swear I'll never let you fall alone. And just like that, Alex's world tilted. His hand, once trembling, found Nathan's. Their fingers laced together, not tentative this time, but certain, solid, real. Down below, New York roared, indifferent and loud, but up here, love carved out a fragile sanctuary. The following weeks weren't easy. They faced the whispers at the office, the narrowed eyes of colleagues who couldn't quite place the tension between them, the late-night rehearsals where fiction blurred dangerously into reality. There were arguments, sharp and cutting. There were tears, frustrated, bitter, but always followed by quiet apologies in the dark. And yet, through the chaos, something unshakable grew. They learned each other's scars. Alex's fear of abandonment, Nathan's guilt of never being enough. They fought through it, sometimes clumsily, sometimes fiercely, but always together. Alex began to see Nathan not as the villain who had walked out of his script, but as a man who had chosen love even when the world painted him otherwise. And Nathan? He saw Alex as more than the playwright who had unknowingly written his destiny. He saw the man who gave him a reason to be vulnerable, to be soft, to be more than the darkness people expected him to embody. The night of the premiere arrived. The theater buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with perfume, wine, and judgment. Critics sat in the velvet rows, pens poised like knives. Alex's hands shook as he clutched the program backstage. It was the story he had written, the villain, the tragedy, the inevitable heartbreak. But somewhere along the way, his real life had rewritten the ending. Nathan found him in the shadows, adjusting his costume, a quiet smirk playing at his lips. "You're nervous." "I'm terrified," Alex admitted, his throat tight. Nathan reached out, brushing his thumb over Alex's knuckles. A silent reassurance. Promise. When the curtain rose, the story unfolded as it always had. Two men locked in conflict. One branded a villain, the other torn apart by love and fear. The audience gasped, clapped, wept. But when it came to the final scene, when the script demanded despair, Nathan hesitated. And in that hesitation, he changed everything. Instead of delivering the fatal blow written on the page, Nathan dropped his weapon. His voice, steady and raw, cut through the silence. "I choose love. I choose him." The theater froze, then erupted. Gasps, confusion, outrage, awe. Critics scribbled furiously. But Alex's breath caught because he knew. Nathan hadn't just defied the script. He had rewritten it here in front of everyone. And when the curtain fell, When the applause crashed like thunder, Nathan pulled Alex into the wings, kissed him hard and unapologetic, and whispered against his lips, "No more tragedies. Not for us." It wasn't a perfect happily ever after. They faced judgment, battles, and scars that didn't vanish overnight. But together they built something real. Something that outlived scripts and stages. Something no critic could reduce to a review. And sometimes, late at night, Alex would roll over in bed, watching Nathan sleep with the faintest smile tugging at his lips. He would remember that first rooftop, that first confession, that impossible leap of faith. And he would whisper, so quietly only the stars could hear, "We burned, but we didn't fall. We wrote our own ending." The city moved on. The play became legend. And somewhere in that endless roar of New York nights, two men held on to each other. Not villains, not victims, not characters, but simply lovers who had dared to step beyond the script. And for them, that was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.